Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the source material to finally demystify those persistent mystery nutrients that are quietly sabotaging your seemingly clean aquarium water. If you've ever felt like you're fighting a totally invisible enemy in your tank, trust me, you are in exactly the right place.
Man, it's incredibly frustrating, isn't it? You carefully test your water, you look at your beautifully pristine tank, everything seems crystal clear, and then boom. Almost overnight, it develops this stubborn film algae, or persistent cloudiness that just won't quit. You might think you're doing absolutely everything right, but as our sources reveal, certain compounds can just slowly accumulate from routine, everyday inputs.
To get to the bottom of this, our roadmap today covers 1. The mystery nutrients themselves, 2. Uncovering their hidden sources, 3. Targeted fixes and solutions, and 4. Achieving long-term stability. Let's get right to it.
Starting off with Section 1, the mystery nutrients, profiling the culprits.
Before we can stop them, we have to know exactly what we're dealing with. Silicates and phosphates are essentially the core energy sources and the fundamental building blocks for nuisance algae. The source text points out a crucial dilemma here. When both phosphate and silicate levels remain high, algae essentially gets a VIP fast pass to take over your tank. That means if you only treat one and totally ignore the other, your algae problem is just going to stubbornly persist. They literally work together to keep your tank looking messy.
Now, there is a really stark difference between how our two culprits operate, which is absolutely fascinating. First up, we have silicates. These are measured as dissolved silicates, and they specifically feed silicon-based algae. They're notoriously tied to brand new tanks, disturbed substrates, and your source water. Then we have phosphates, typically measured as PO4. Phosphates act as a massive energy source for a huge variety of algae and biofilms, but they are closely tied to organic loading and your feeding habits. Because they behave so differently, tackling them requires completely complementary, customized strategies.
Moving right along to Section 2, uncovering the hidden sources, finding the hideouts.
What's truly surprising here is that you might assume your tank is a perfectly sealed fortress, but the sources reveal that silicates frequently enter right through your tap water. They also sneak in through brand new substrates that haven't fully stabilized, older sand beds that get disturbed and release trapped material, or even aesthetic buffering additives that you completely thought were safe. The source material also points out that your filter media, if contaminated or improperly maintained, can actually be a hidden hideout for silicates.
Phosphates, on the flip side, have a totally different entry point. They're heavily driven by organic loading. Uneaten food and fish waste naturally break down into phosphate as bacteria process those organics. Even with reasonable feeding, if your system is under-exporting nutrients, phosphates are going to gradually accumulate. This brings up a tough question you really need to ask yourself. Are you just feeding your fish, or are you accidentally setting up an all-you-can-eat buffet for algae? Also, don't overlook decaying plant matter or insufficient water movement that lets fine particulates just sit there and rot.
All right, on to Section 3, targeted fixes and solutions, the tactical plan.
So how do we actually stop these bottlenecks? Well, the source text gives us a brilliantly straightforward three-step methodology. Step 1, measure. Confirm your levels with consistent test kits or lab testing. Stop guessing. Step 2, reduce. Adjust your inputs and your nutrient export based on what those numbers actually say. And Step 3, prevent. Maintain reliable, ongoing methods to avoid future buildup. It's a highly targeted eradication plan designed to treat the root cause rather than just putting a Band-Aid on the symptoms.
To actually pull this off, the sources lay out completely separate battle plans for each nutrient. For silicates, your fixes are heavily geared and chemistry-focused. You'll want to test your source water, switch to highly filtered RO/DI water if your tap is the issue, avoid aggressively stirring your substrate, and run appropriate silicate removal media. For phosphates, the battle shifts heavily to biology and maintenance. You need to improve your feeding discipline, raise your mechanical export to catch those fine particulates, utilize protein skimming in marine tanks to pull out waste early, and commit to consistent water changes for freshwater systems. The key takeaway, you absolutely need specific, tailored interventions for each nutrient.
But wait, before you rush to implement those fixes, let's look at this crucial pre-action verification checklist. The source heavily emphasizes that you must verify your water parameters before you go changing multiple variables at once. Proactively address your source water if you notice spikes happening right after a water change. Make sure you clean out accessible detritus to stop phosphate generation right at its source. And whenever you're using binders or specialized media, you absolutely must follow their specific dosage and replacement schedules.
And that brings us to our final section, Part 4, Achieving Long-Term Stability, Securing the Perimeter.
Listen, the sources emphasize a massive warning here. Do not shock the system. A huge, very common mistake is panicking and changing absolutely everything at once. We're talking dumping in new salt mixes, swapping out all your filtration media, and totally altering your feeding routine on the exact same day. If you don't allow your aquarium's fragile biology to stabilize, it causes a severe nutrient rebound, meaning those levels will just shoot right back up after an initial drop.
Instead of panicking, the source recommends implementing your fixes on a highly controlled timeline. On day 1, focus solely on improving your source water and your basic nutrient export. Give it a beat. Then, during week 1, start refining your feeding habits and tweaking your filtration media. From there, monitor weekly. By pacing yourself like this, you guarantee steady progress rather than creating abrupt, chaotic swings that severely disrupt the beneficial microbes your entire tank relies on.
You also need to keep a really close eye out for side effects. I know it is so tempting to just roll up your sleeves and aggressively scrub every single inch of the tank to get it clean. Resist that urge. Over-aggressive substrate cleaning or excessive water chemistry adjustments can actually stress out your livestock and temporarily make your algae problem even worse. Remember, we are aiming for slow, steady progress here, not a total overnight reboot.
So, how do you actually know when you're winning this invisible war? Well, if silicates were your main driver, nuisance films will ease up once your source water is corrected and leaching materials are handled. If phosphates were the issue, algae growth will slow down significantly once your feeding is dialed in and detritus is controlled. But the absolute best sign of victory isn't just a single lucky test result, it's a sustained pattern of lower readings over time, right alongside calmer, noticeably clearer tank visuals.
Which leaves us with this final thought. Silicates and phosphates are rarely just random bad luck. They come from identifiable inputs like your water, your food, your materials, and trapped organics. So I have to ask you, moving forward, are you going to treat the actual root cause, carefully measure, and maintain consistent nutrient export, or are you just going to keep temporarily masking the algae? Keep that in mind next time you look at your tank. And thanks so much for joining me on this explainer.